For nearly 7 decades, Robert Redford was the man Hollywood couldn't stop falling in love with. The golden smile, the effortless charm, the rebel heart wrapped in a tailored suit. He was the kind of actor who didn't just play characters, he embodied eras. From the 1960s counterculture to the golden glow of 70s cinema, his face became a symbol of timeless cool. But behind that effortless magnetism hid a man who rarely revealed himself. Redford built walls so high that not even Hollywood's brightest lights could see past them. And yet, at 89, the man who once guarded every emotion finally broke his silence. He said softly, "You can build a life on success, but it means nothing if you lose the person who taught you how to love." Those words landed like a confession, intimate, fragile, and startlingly human. Who was he talking about? Why did he keep this secret buried for almost his entire life? And what does a man who's had everything, fame, fortune, admiration, truly regret when the applause fades? Stay with me, because this isn't just another Hollywood story. It's the story of what happens when the man who had it all finally admits what he lost. The Golden Boy with a secret. Robert Redford's life looked perfect from the outside. The dazzling blonde hair, the effortless grin, the quiet confidence. He seemed born for the silver screen. Audiences saw him as the embodiment of the American dream, handsome, talented, and untouchable. With Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Way We Were, and The Sting, he wasn't just acting, he was defining what charisma looked like. Every glance, every smirk, every pause carried weight. Yet few realized that behind that golden image was a boy from a working-class neighborhood in Santa Monica. A boy who often felt like an outsider in his own story. He once joked, "I wasn't the smartest guy in school. I just knew how to run fast and paint badly." It's funny, but it's also painfully revealing. Redford wasn't the Hollywood prodigy people imagined. He was restless, curious, and allergic to authority. He loved art, tennis, and the open air more than any textbook could ever offer. His teachers called him distracted. He called himself lost. That wild streak got him kicked out of the University of Colorado after too many parties and too little discipline. For most, that would have been the end of a promising life. But for Redford, it was the beginning. He packed his sketchbook and disappeared across Europe, drifting through France, Spain, and Italy, surviving on little more than talent and stubbornness. He slept in hostels, painted on street corners, and learned how to see the world without judgment. There, surrounded by unfamiliar languages and endless skies, he discovered something that no classroom could teach: perspective. That period of wandering became the foundation of the man he would become. Observant, introspective, and fiercely independent. Every experience, every mistake, carved into him a sense of authenticity that would later make his performances so believable. When he finally returned to the United States, he wasn't the same kid who left. He was hungry to create, to feel, to express something real. Long before he ever stood under studio lights, Redford had already fallen in love. Not with fame, not with money, but with truth. And that pursuit of truth, as beautiful as it sounds, would become both his greatest gift and his deepest burden. Young love and tragedy. When Robert Redford met Lola Van Wagenen in the late 1950s, he wasn't the Hollywood legend we know today. He was a dreamer, a young man still trying to understand what his life could become. She, on the other hand, was everything he wasn't. Calm, steady, rooted in her faith and her small-town Utah upbringing. Lola came from a conservative Mormon family that valued stability, while Robert had always been drawn to chaos, to the thrill of uncertainty, to the idea that life was meant to be lived, not planned. Their connection was instant, the kind of chemistry that doesn't ask for permission. To the world, they might have looked like an odd match, a quiet academic girl and a rebellious artist. But to them, it made perfect sense. She saw something in me I didn't even know existed, Redford would later say. Their love wasn't built on logic, it was built on instinct, wild, unpolished, and very real. They eloped in 1958, defying her parents' wishes. No grand ceremony, no Hollywood glam, just two people running toward each other because the rest of the world didn't make sense. Imagine that moment, a young couple standing together, full of hope and fear, promising forever with no map to guide them. It was impulsive, it was naive, and yet it was the truest thing in their lives. The early years were far from easy. Redford wasn't yet famous, far from it. He painted houses between auditions, did odd jobs to make rent, and sometimes questioned if he'd made a huge mistake chasing a dream that seemed so far away. Lola worked quietly behind the scenes, keeping their small apartment running, believing in him even when he didn't believe in himself. They lived on very little but had what mattered most, each other. Then came tragedy, the kind that doesn't just hurt, but reshapes everything you are. Their first child, Scott, died of sudden infant death syndrome at just a few months old. It's the kind of heartbreak no parent ever truly recovers from. Redford rarely spoke publicly about it, but those who knew him said it changed him forever. The smile that once seemed effortless now carried a shadow. He once reflected, "Pain carves you open, but that's how the light gets in." In that moment, the man who would one day charm millions learned what real loss felt like. It made him deeper, quieter, more aware of how fragile love can be. For years afterward, Redford carried that pain like an invisible scar, one that shaped how he approached everything: his art, his family, even his fame. But heartbreak doesn't wait for you to heal. It lingers, patient, heavy, and ever-present, until life forces you into your next chapter, ready or not. Hollywood calls and takes. Success hit like a storm, sudden, thrilling, and impossible to control. One day, Robert Redford was an unknown stage actor struggling to pay rent. The next, Barefoot in the Park on Broadway, turned him into a star. Audiences adored his mix of rugged masculinity and boyish charm. Producers couldn't get enough of him. Hollywood came calling almost immediately, and soon Robert Redford was no longer just a talented young actor. He was the face of a new generation. When Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid hit theaters, his partnership with Paul Newman became legendary. Their chemistry was effortless, like two opposites that somehow made perfect sense together. Newman, the smooth veteran; Redford, the cool rebel. The film catapulted him into superstardom, and suddenly his name alone could sell out a theater. His smile, practically a weapon. The media called him the Golden Boy. But gold, as we know, comes at a price. Because here's the truth: fame doesn't just give, it takes. While Redford traveled the world shooting movies in Morocco, Paris, and New York, Lola stayed home, raising their growing family almost entirely on her own. What started as physical distance quietly turned into emotional distance. He'd call between flights, send postcards from hotel rooms, but the connection that once felt unbreakable began to fade. Like ivy creeping up the walls of their marriage, success slowly strangled the intimacy they had built. He later admitted, "I was too ambitious to see what I was losing." That confession hits harder than any tabloid headline. Think about it. How often do we chase success so fiercely that we forget who we're doing it for? Redford wasn't just acting in movies. He was acting in life, playing the role of the perfect star while his real life unraveled off-screen. As his films broke box office records, The Sting, The Great Gatsby, All the President's Men, the man behind the fame began to learn a painful truth: applause can't replace affection. Crowds can cheer, critics can praise, but none of it fills the silence of an empty house. And when he finally came home, that silence was deafening. The house wasn't as full as it used to be. Not of people, not of laughter, not of him. Fame, passion, and the cost of searching. By the mid-1980s, Robert Redford's storybook marriage had reached its final page. After 27 years together, he and Lola quietly divorced. There were no scandals, no explosive headlines, just two people who had weathered too many storms to keep pretending they were still in the same boat. It wasn't bitter, he said years later, just broken. They remained friends, but friendship is a fragile consolation when love has already slipped through your fingers. What came next was a blur of passion, fame, and restlessness. Redford had spent decades playing characters who were in control, but in real life, he was drifting. His first post-divorce romance was with Sonia Braga, the Brazilian actress known for her fearless sensuality and fiery spirit. She was everything his structured Hollywood life wasn't: spontaneous, loud, alive. Their connection was instant and electric. They were photographed together at Cannes, glowing with that intoxicating mix of new love and rebellion. But like many fires that burn too hot, it consumed itself quickly. Within a year, the flame had vanished, leaving behind only a few tender memories and an echo of what could have been. Then came Lena Olin, the Swedish actress whose calm presence balanced Redford's quiet intensity. They met on the set of Havana in 1990, and their chemistry was undeniable, the kind that made audiences wonder if it was even acting. Olin later said that Redford had a sadness in his eyes that made every scene feel real. But when filming ended, life intruded. Both were at different stages in their lives, and what had felt like destiny under the camera lights couldn't survive reality once the credits rolled. Each relationship played out like one of his films, beautifully written, perfectly framed, but destined for an ending. Redford, the director of The Horse Whisperer, seemed unable to whisper peace into his own heart. You can sense the pattern forming. A man not searching for new love, but trying to fill the space left by the one woman who had truly known him. Was it love he was chasing, or was he seeking forgiveness? Not from Lola, but from himself. Hollywood adored him. The world saw confidence, charm, and control. But privately, Redford struggled with an inner silence. Fame had given him everything except peace. Hollywood loved me, he once reflected, but I didn't always love myself. And through all the affairs and applause, there was one thing that never changed. He never stopped speaking kindly of Lola. In a rare moment of honesty, he told a friend, "You never stop loving someone. You just learn to live with the echo." That echo, soft, haunting, eternal, would follow him for the rest of his life. Reinvention and loss. The 1990s could have been Robert Redford's retirement era, a time to step back, enjoy the fruits of fame, and fade gracefully into legend. But Redford never believed in quiet. While many of his peers retreated from the spotlight, he reinvented himself yet again, not as an actor chasing roles, but as a storyteller creating them. He turned his focus behind the camera, directing films like A River Runs Through It and The Horse Whisperer, both meditations on nature, healing, and human fragility. Those themes weren't accidental. They reflected the man he was becoming, introspective, philosophical, and aware that life's beauty is inseparable from its pain. He founded the Sundance Institute and its now famous film festival, giving independent filmmakers the chance he wished someone had given him. Through Sundance, Redford became a mentor rather than a star, using his influence to amplify new voices. It was his way of giving back, and perhaps of atoning for the times he'd been too consumed by his own ambition to listen. But even purpose and success couldn't shield him from personal loss. In 2020, his son James passed away after a long battle with cancer. Robert described the loss as losing a piece of my own story. James wasn't just his child, he was his creative twin, an environmentalist and filmmaker who shared his father's deep belief in art as a force for change. Redford called him hope in human form. It's easy to forget that legends bleed the same way we do. The man who once seemed larger than life was now confronting something he couldn't charm or outact: time. And as the years folded in, Redford's art became quieter, but his purpose grew louder. A legacy built not on applause, but on endurance, the second love, and the confession. Then came Sybil Saggers, an artist, environmentalist, and the woman who met Robert not as a Hollywood legend, but as a human being. Their meeting wasn't scripted or staged. It happened in the quiet serenity of Sundance, his beloved mountain retreat. Sybil had come there to showcase her art, not realizing she was about to meet one of cinema's most iconic figures. When they first spoke, she didn't even know who he was. Later she laughed about it, admitting, "I had to rent his movies to see what everyone was talking about." And he adored that. For once, he didn't have to be Robert Redford the myth. He could just be Robert, flawed, aging, genuine. He said, "With her, I could stop performing." That single sentence was his confession, the one hidden beneath decades of fame. After a lifetime of playing heroes and heartbreakers, Redford finally met someone who didn't want the performance. Sybil wanted the man behind it, the one who still carried guilt, grief, and tenderness in equal measure. Their love wasn't loud or cinematic. It was grounded, simple, and real. They painted together, spent long days surrounded by nature, and eventually co-founded The Way of the Rain, an environmental art project blending music, visual art, and storytelling. For a man who had spent decades chasing storms, metaphorical and literal, he had finally found stillness. But his confession went deeper than love. It was about understanding what love teaches. At 89, he reflected, "You don't fall out of love. You fall out of the habit of saying it." Those words carried a lifetime of wisdom. The awareness that love doesn't fade. It just waits for us to remember how to speak it again. And only someone who's lost it knows how sacred that truth really is. The final chapter. At 89, Robert Redford no longer feels the need to play heroes, on screen or in life. The man who once embodied rebellion and romance now finds peace in stillness. His final act isn't written in scripts or framed by cameras. It's lived quietly, surrounded by nature, art, and the woman who helped him rediscover simplicity. At his Sundance home, mornings begin with the sound of wind in the aspens and the smell of paint and coffee, reminders that creation doesn't end when fame fades. He has said, "Life is about learning and growing no matter your age." The trick is realizing that love is part of that learning. That line captures the essence of his confession. After a lifetime of chasing perfection, he has learned that love isn't about beginnings or endings. It's about being fully present while it lasts. Perhaps that's what he was always searching for. Not romance, not redemption, but understanding. Maybe the confession isn't that he finally found love, but that he finally understood it. That love doesn't complete you, it teaches you. And in learning that, Robert Redford, the man who gave us so many stories, finally wrote his most honest one. Until his final days, when Robert Redford reflects on his life, he rarely mentions the Oscars, the fame, or the critical acclaim that once defined him. Instead, he speaks softly about the things that last: art, family, and the natural world. Those quiet, enduring passions have become his true north. When asked in a recent interview what advice he'd give to his younger self, Robert Redford took a long pause. Decades of memories seemed to settle behind his eyes before he gave that familiar half-grin, the same one that once melted audiences worldwide. Then he said, "Slow down. The things you think can wait. Love, family, forgiveness. They can't." That simple sentence carries the weight of a lifetime. It's the emotional confession behind the headline, not just about one woman, but about every choice, every missed moment, every quiet regret that success could never erase. It's about the dinners skipped, the apologies delayed, the love left unspoken. And isn't that something we all understand, no matter who we are? The truth that time always moves faster than we expect, and the people we take for granted don't stay forever. Maybe that's why his story resonates so deeply. Beneath the fame and fortune lies a universal lesson that our greatest achievements mean little if we forget the hearts that stood beside us along the way. Because when the lights dim and the applause fades, what truly remains isn't what we achieved. It's who waited for us to come home, us to come home, us to